Namaskar and thank you for joining us on the Economic Brief, the weekly program that gets you key stories from the worlds of business and economy from an Indian point of view of the world. On the program, Pakistan's economy is in shambles. Pursuing terrorism has isolated it and debilitated its economy further. Saudi Arabia and the UAE look for more lucrative economic trade options with India, further straining Pakistan's financial aid. Well, Moody's warns that sustained tensions with India could hinder Pakistan's economic growth, disrupt fiscal consolidation and strain foreign exchange reserves. Pakistan doesn't have the resources to meet external debt obligations. Moodys said the ongoing geopolitical stress may impair access to external financing and also delay macroeconomic stability. Here's our report. Moody's has warned that escalating tensions between India and Pakistan could have a negative impact on Pakistan's economy, while India is expected to remain relatively stable. The Moody's report says prolonged tensions could slow Pakistan's economic growth, hamper fiscal consolidation and strain foreign exchange reserves. Pakistan's ability to secure external funding could be restricted, making it harder to meet debt obligations. Pakistan's benchmark KSE 100 index has fallen over 16,000 points since April 23 due to rising tensions. The IMF is reviewing Pakistan's $7 billion bailout package this month, and tensions could complicate negotiations. India's strong macroeconomic fundamentals, public investment and private consumption are expected to shield it from major disruptions. India is on a solid growth path.
And when investment comes and moves, it moves in the expectation that they will be able to make profit. So naturally, if Indian economy is growing and the demand is growing, consumption is increasing, so there will be interest of the foreign investors that they should put more money in India.
Pakistan's economic recovery remains fragile, and sustained tensions could derail its progress. Of all the products Pakistan imports from India, pharmaceuticals are vital.
Probably Pakistan will realize little later how much cost they have to incur. They are already short of the foreign exchange reserve, and Indian pharma has been the most competitive among all the products which we are exporting to Pakistan. If they have to get these kinds of drugs from European Union, probably the cost will vary between 400% to 1000%. It will be a huge hit on the pocket of the consumer in Pakistan, and probably Pakistan will realize it very shortly.
Past conflicts between India and Pakistan have had significant economic consequences for Pakistan. Pakistan's economy contracted by 2.5% due to reduced foreign investment and higher military expenditure after Kargil 1999. After the Pulwama attack and Balakot strikes in 2019, Pakistan's stock market fell by 7%, and the Pakistani rupee depreciated sharply, making imports more expensive. Pakistan had to seek IMF assistance due to falling reserves, and its bailouts came with tougher conditions. Pakistan's military budget increases during conflicts, diverting funds from education, healthcare and infrastructure. Pakistan's economy has historically struggled to recover from its geopolitical misadventures. The Economic Brief, DD India. And we have with us Prasenjit Basu, author and economist who has tracked the Asian economies very closely. He's with us in the studio. Thank you very much, Mr. Basu. Now, do you see the going getting really tough for Pakistani businesses? Because, in the past, the conflicts have led to a diversion of funds to other expenditure necessary. And then, obviously, the government would need money and they would be taxing the businesses even more, isn't it?
Yes, as part of the fiscal consolidation required by the IMF, they've had to raise some taxes. They're trying to begin a process of privatizations, etc., and they've had to cut spending. So the economy is already struggling. This year, they're expected to grow only about 2.5% real GDP. And if you look at Pakistan's economy, in 1990, Pakistan's per capita GDP was a lot higher than India's. It was about 30% higher. Now, it is about half the size of India, half the per capita income of India. The size is almost, it's tiny compared to the size of the Indian economy. And if you look at, particularly PPP-based, purchasing power parity-based GDP, then Pakistan's is half of India's. If you look at GDP nominal dollars, it's about 1,500 per capita GDP in Pakistan. India is around 2,500. So substantially poorer now and always precariously positioned. Pakistan has now had 25 IMF programs and is now looking to add a 26th.
Right.
There is a review meeting tomorrow. The IMF staff has recommended that $1 billion be disbursed. It's very unlikely that it will not be. But if the conflict persists, if Pakistan continues to divert spending towards defense, then it's very likely that the next review for Pakistan will go very badly. And Pakistan cannot afford that because its external debt to GDP is around 44%. It's a very, very indebted country. Its debt service ratio is very high.
Sure.
So, a lot of, about nearly half, let's say, over 40% of the amount of exports of goods and services goes towards servicing
the debt,
servicing its external debt.
Right.
So it's a precarious position. They cannot afford to keep fighting wars, and
absolutely.
So they've actually taken the low cost option of using terrorism instead of war.
We'll go into that in some detail, but let's talk a little bit about the economy. And the stock markets have tanked 16,000 points plus since the 23rd of April, and more than 8,000 points in one day. So it hit a circuit. Where do you see the bottom?
Well, I think if they continue to escalate, if the war escalates further, then it could easily fall by another 30-40%. The stock market, that is. But that is really only a reflection of the underlying fundamental weakness of the economy. India has none of those problems. India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. It continues to be that. And the external balances are hardly going to be affected by any sort of war. But in Pakistan's case, they are fragile.
Right.
And this government has done quite a bit to try and meet the IMF's conditions. But the IMF's conditions basically are austere. They have to keep interest rates high. They have to bring the fiscal deficit down. And those are difficult things to do, which basically ensures that the economy is growing very slowly. 2.5% a year is the average growth rate now. If you look at the last 5 or 6 years, they've had 2 years of contraction in those 5 years anyway. And if they now need to spend more on defense. That jeopardizes the economic situation.
India has received support from across the world, the right to respond, defend itself from this terror attack. Now, do you see more diplomatic measures on the financial front, multilateral financial institutions, you already mentioned IMF, being brought to bear on Pakistan to try and, not spend its money on exporting terrorism?
Absolutely. The basic point is that if they are going to receive funding now that stabilizes the macroeconomy, that money needs to be sequestered. It cannot be used for defense, or rather for attack. And that is obviously an implicit condition. Pakistan is desperately in need of aid from other countries. China is, of course, the eternal friend that continues to provide a lot of support. But a lot of the other friends of Pakistan, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, were traditional friends that provided a lot of backing for Pakistan in the past, but both are now looking to India as a key investment destination and trading partner. The UAE, of course, now has an FTA with India. and that relationship continues to grow and develop. So Pakistan is losing friends. It's losing wealthy friends in particular.
Yes.
And that makes it far more difficult. Now, obviously, in the IMF, the US has has the largest vote. The European Union has a significant vote. UK, etc., also have significant votes, and India has a vote too. So
Sure.
It is not likely that tomorrow
Okay.
there will be an immediate stop in the $1 billion that is likely to be disbursed as part of the EFF.
There may be more conditions, is what
There'll
you're
be
saying.
more conditions, and the other, Pakistan has applied for another $2.3 billion loan under the climate financing facility. That seems very unlikely to go through immediately. There'll be more discussions around that, so that'll be delayed.
Right.
And these are the sorts of things that make it very difficult for Pakistan's already fragile economy.
So how has the Financial Action Task Force grey listing influenced Pakistan's banking sector and also its foreign transactions?
Well, they have to tighten up the financing of terrorism in particular, and money laundering more broadly.
Yeah, because they pick up money from all these places, and then it obviously, in cash and things like that, and it's used for financing terrorism.
And quite frankly, the Biden administration was much more liberal in its approach to dealing with things like this. I think the Trump administration will be much less tolerant of money laundering, particularly money laundering that goes towards financing terrorism.
In the guise of charities, for instance, that's one of the ways.
Absolutely. I mean, all of these, the so-called Bahawalpur camp is supposed to be a charity institution, when it clearly is the base for Lashkar-e-Toiba. So you have these, these forms of grey market financing or whatever. It's truly money laundering on a grand scale for terrorism. Any sort of tolerance of this that the Biden administration had is very unlikely to persist under the Trump administration. Pakistan, of course, tried to appease the Trump administration very early on by sending a terrorist who had been arrested to the United States. But those sorts of band-aid measures are unlikely to carry too much weight with the Trump administration.
You did talk about Pakistan's dependence. Let's run a particular story now on Pakistan being economically dependent on China, Saudi Arabia and the UAE for financial aid, investments and debt relief. Now, China, in fact, provides major loans through the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and holds about 22% of Pakistan's external debt. Saudi Arabia deferred oil payment facilities. The UAE is rolling over loans. Now, but both these Gulf nations, as Mr. Basu has said, are strengthening economic ties with India. Let's look at this report.
Pakistan faces economic challenges, including high inflation, a depreciating currency, and a persistent balance of payments deficit, necessitating reliance on International Monetary Fund bailouts. While foreign exchange reserves may reach $14 billion by June of 2025, the country requires $27 billion annually to meet financial obligations.
The case with regard to Pakistan should be self-evident to those people who generously open their pockets to bail out this country. And I think you would also have an idea of how many of those programs have actually reached successful conclusion. Probably not many. So I think this is a decision that board members have to take by looking deep within themselves and looking at the facts.
The suspension of bilateral trade and the Indus Water Treaty by India could further strain Pakistan's economy, particularly its agriculture and hydropower sectors.
And it is also a signal to Pakistan. You see, it's primarily an agricultural country. And it is dependent only on one river system, which is the Indus, and its tributaries. So for the farming community, for the farmers, for the people, where about 80% to 90% of the irrigation and agriculture in Pakistan is dependent on the Indus River system. So the impact that has on the farmers, psychological impact, is going to be huge.
Pakistan's financial dependence on China remains substantial, with $28.8 billion in Chinese debt, 22% of total external debt. These loans, predominantly issued at commercial rates, have placed pressure on Pakistan's fiscal position. China continues to roll over loans, including a $2 billion rollover in 2025, and supplies 81% of Pakistan's arms imports, reinforcing Pakistan's strategic alignment with Beijing. Excessive Chinese lending threatens Pakistan's fiscal independence, as much of its budget and reserves are consumed by debt repayment, raising concerns about debt trap diplomacy. Saudi Arabia and the UAE also play critical roles in Pakistan's economic stability, providing billions of dollars in loans and deposits. In 2024, Saudi Arabia committed $2.8 billion in investment agreements, maintaining its position as Pakistan's top remittance source, with over 2.7 million Pakistani expatriates working in the kingdom. Alongside China and Saudi Arabia, the UAE has helped Pakistan avert bankruptcy. However, both Gulf countries are increasingly prioritizing economic ties with India, which could impact Pakistan's future access to financial aid. The Economic Brief, DD India.
And Prasenjit Basu continues to be with us. Now, you've already answered this question to some extent. You did talk about the IMF meeting. But do you think that they're going to make things harder, given the fact that Pakistan is already debt-trapped? I mean, it's debt-trapped by China. That's the big deal, isn't it?
Yes. So, in effect, the IMF is making $1 billion potentially available to Pakistan tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
Some of that is going towards servicing debt that Pakistan owes to China,
Right.
nearly a quarter of it, or at least more than a fifth. And some of it is going towards funding its war that
Right.
it is conducting against India. So, these are things, in terms of the fungibility of what Pakistan uses the money for, there is not much that the IMF can do about the fact that some of the money is going towards servicing debt to China. But what it can do is put in place conditions regarding defense spending, any kind of increased defense spending or any kind of increase in war fighting that occurs is likely to potentially result in a suspension of the disbursements. The disbursements don't happen immediately after the meeting, but the IMF is quite likely to make the next disbursement conditional upon restraint on the armed forces front.
Now, can the other donors to Pakistan also act in the same way as the IMF, asking them, to stop their terrorist activities? Because after all, the money that they are providing is actually for an economic revival of Pakistan, but in the end, it could be just be used to divert it to fund terrorism, and countries wouldn't like that, isn't it?
Well, I think the 22nd April incident, terrorist incident, atrocity in Pahalgam, was timed for two things. One, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in Saudi Arabia on that day. Second, the previous day, J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, was in India.
Right.
So it was very well timed to basically attack both fronts. The fact that one of its most trusted friends was befriending India and has been befriending India increasingly over recent years was obviously something that Pakistan, in particular the extremist element in the military, found distasteful and expressed through this move. So I can assure you that Saudi Arabia took note of this. It was a kind of insult to Saudi Arabia in a way. The fact that this had occurred when it was receiving an important guest, and so it actually is going to complicate matters for Pakistan going forward. Now, Pakistan, I think, has been used to the fact that India has merely threatened action and not taken too much action before 2014. I mean, especially the 2008 atrocity in Mumbai. But this is a different regime. And what is important is that India is not escalating. India is calibrating its responses.
Right.
Initially, the response was aimed at terrorist training facilities.
Right.
The second response was to Pakistan's retaliation, 15
yes,
military
absolutely,
sites.
absolutely.
So it is a calibrated response, and I think what is happening now is that Pakistan has been responding as if it did not face any economic constraints.
Sure.
But of course it does, and the economic factor is going to become increasingly important as we go forward. It's never been quite as stark
All right.
as it is now, because if you look at Pakistan, in 1971, West Pakistan was about had double the per capita GDP of East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh.
Sure.
Today, Bangladesh is ahead of Pakistan. So Pakistan is falling further and further behind
Yes.
economically.
Right.
It's becoming more and more dependent on China, and any country that is economically
Okay.
dependent on China becomes debt trapped.
So
Pakistan is-
you've written this book on Asia Reborn and how all the Asian economies are coming to their own. Pakistan is also part of that. Would you call Pakistan the sick man of Asia in a sense? And also the fact that, if for Pakistan to revive, it needs to tap international markets, and it has a pretty bad reputation currently.
Yes, for the last 30 years, Pakistan has increasingly become the sick man of Asia. In the early years, the first 30, 40 years after independence, it was an agriculture-driven economy, and its agriculture sector was far more successful than India's. And that gave it a certain stability. It has never really succeeded in developing a globally competitive industrial sector. It's had some niches in labor-intensive manufacturing, but never really a broad-based industrial sector. And nor has it really developed a services sector. So the economy is somewhat unidimensional, and in that sense has become a bit of a sick man relative to a dynamic region where everything east of it, starting with India, has prospered, especially over the last 30 years. So Pakistan is falling further and further behind, and of course pursuing terrorism as its main means of foreign policy, and perhaps its only export, is not really a path to get out of this debt trap.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Mr. Prasenjit Basu. Thank you for throwing light on the economic situation that Pakistan is in and the precarious situation it is in pursuing a conflict with India. Now, that's all we have in this edition of the Economic Brief. News and updates continue here on DD India. Stay tuned. But from all of us here at the Economic Brief, thank you very much for watching. Namaskar.